Lake Natalie. That's one suggestion for renaming Lake Ontario after Donald Trump and his continuing demented fit of rage at the best neighboring country that exists anywhere in the world, Canada. After we showed video on this program last night of Ontario's Premier Doug Ford attacking Donald Trump's new tariffs on Canadian goods and pointing out to Americans that we are the ones who actually pay the Trump tariffs on Canada, which are, of course, taxes, sales taxes on the goods we buy from Canada. Doug Ford pointed out 1/3 of homes built in the United States use Canadian lumber and will be 50%, that lumber is going to be 50% more expensive for us here in the United States. 50% sales tax thanks to Donald Trump. At 6:58 a.m. this morning, Donald Trump posted on social media that he is, quote, giving serious consideration to changing the name of Lake Ontario to Lake America. That is, of course, a lie. Donald Trump doesn't know how to give serious consideration to anything. And 3 hours later, the man who launched what the Wall Street Journal is calling the dumbest trade war in history posted the dumbest map of our northern border that anyone working in the American government has ever used. To which Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell replied, let's just call it Lake Natalie so we know you'll start protecting our Great Lakes. It is Natalie Harp's job in the White House to help Donald Trump post what functions now as maps like this one right here. This is a map of Donald Trump's mental decline. That's what it actually maps. It's like the one that she no doubt, Natalie Harp, this is her work, no doubt, helping Donald Trump with this kind of thing today. That's what the American taxpayer is paying Natalie Harp for. Natalie Harp has been trying to help Donald Trump tweet his way to victory in the war that he started in Iran. But the racist posts that she helps Donald Trump put out about the Obamas and the other madness she helps Donald Trump put out on social media isn't winning his war in Iran. Natalie Harp is surely busy helping Donald Trump post deranged images of himself as a member of the United States military, a commander, like this sheer madness posted by Donald Trump with Natalie Harp's help. Amazingly enough, that post of Donald Trump pretending to be a general was posted on August 4th. And Iran still hasn't surrendered. 21 days later, I mean, look at how scary Donald Trump looks standing there with Douglas MacArthur and George Patton, two of the most famous generals of World War II, each of whom have been the subjects of Hollywood movies. And maybe when Hollywood gets around to making a worshipful movie about General Trump, Iran will finally surrender. Look at that image. And imagine how small the brains have to be, how tiny the brains have to be of the people, the two people who put those tiny brains together, Donald Trump and Natalie Harp, to post madness like that. Imagine how small those Natalie Harp and Donald Trump brains are when they're collaborating on how to scare Iran today on social media. In their best-selling book, Regime Change, Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan reported that Vice President James David Vance advised Donald Trump against starting a war with Iran. On page 402, they report, quote, but with the exception of the vice president, nobody on the senior team, not his Secretary of State, not his chairman of the Joint Chiefs, not his chief of staff, had made a real effort to talk him out of it. On the next page, they have this account of the final meeting about going to war in Iran. On Thursday, February 26th, around 5 p.m., the final go, no-go meeting got underway in the Situation Room. By now, the positions of everyone in the room had crystallized. Everything had been discussed in prior meetings. Everyone knew everyone else's stance. The president was the president, and they would back his decision. There were no presentations, no paperwork, just a discussion that would last an hour and a half. The war planning group had been kept so tight that the two key officials who would need to manage the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Energy Secretary Chris Wright, were still not in the loop one day before the launch of the war, nor was the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. The Director of National Intelligence wasn't even in the room for the final go, no-go meeting. Today, the Wall Street Journal is reporting this about Tulsi Gabbard. Days before going to war with Iran in February, President Trump summoned his intelligence chief to the Oval Office to ask whether a full-on assault was a good idea. Then Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, outlined assessments from America's intelligence apparatus, according to people familiar with the meeting. She told Trump that killing Iran's supreme leader would likely usher in more hardline regime open to acquiring nuclear weapons. Tehran would rush to close the Strait of Hormuz, destabilizing the global energy market, and it would strike U.S. forces and partners in the Middle East, prompting questions about American resolve and reliability with allies. And so Donald Trump was warned. And Donald Trump alone made the decision to go to war. Today's Wall Street Journal report includes Donald Trump's reaction to Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz. Quote, several leaders from Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar, contacted the White House seeking an end to the fighting and a face-saving diplomatic solution for all involved. Republicans also called Trump, telling him the war was hurting the party's prospects in the November midterms. Trump privately fumed at the backlash. Officials said he queried aides about why Iran wasn't backing down amid the unrelenting bombing campaign. On June 17 came the breakthrough, an interim peace agreement to reopen the strait, paving the way for 60 days of nuclear talks. Asked by confidants why Trump went for a temporary deal, the president pointed to new internal White House polling. Nearly 80% of Americans wanted an agreement to end the conflict, no matter its contents. And so, as we suggested on this program at the time, Donald Trump accepted that memorandum of understanding with Iran because his war was polling very badly. And it still is. New polling shows that 62% disapprove of how Donald Trump is handling his war in Iran. 65% say that the United States should make a deal to end the war as soon as possible. And 57% think Donald Trump was wrong in his decision to go to war with Iran. Donald Trump and his absurdly incompetent Treasury Secretary have for days now been threatening a so-called economic D-Day attack launched against Iran. The threat, which Donald Trump absolutely will not carry out, is for the United States to shut down all economic activity with any country that in any way does business with Iran. Scott Bessent is threatening to ban any country from using the American banking system in any way if they do business with Iran. Scott Bessent himself, in trying to sound threatening to Iran, described what he was talking about as, quote, blowing up the global financial system, end quote. That's his threat to Iran. And so we now have Scott Bessent acting like a worldwide economic terrorist in the Treasury Department, who says that his plan to defeat Iran is to blow up the global financial system. The reason that did not sound threatening to Iran is that even though Scott Bessent described his threat as blowing up the global financial system, he said very, very clearly that he's not going to do that.
You described this as an economic D-Day, but D-Day wasn't a threat of an invasion, and the U.S. didn't give a timeline to Germany. So why not impose the sanctions today?
Well, we are giving everyone the opportunity to remedy bad behavior. Why would I want to blow up the global financial system?
Yeah, good question, Scott. And the answer is you will not dare. And Donald Trump will once again back down from a Donald Trump threat. Donald Trump will not dare to blow up the global financial system because Donald Trump will also blow up the economy of the United States while he's at it. And everyone in the world knows that, very much including China. China is the largest buyer of Iran's oil, and China will continue to be the largest buyer of Iran's oil, no matter what Donald Trump and his clownish Treasury Secretary say. In Donald Trump's hopeless attempt to divert attention from his war in Iran, he has invited Chinese President Xi to the White House next month, and now all the questions about that visit are going to be about Iran, because today, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson said, quote, China is firmly against sanctions that have no basis in international law or UN Security Council mandate. Economic warfare and maximum pressure provide no solution. They only serve to fuel tensions, disrupt global economic and financial order, and hurt everyone else's interests. Dialogue and negotiation is the only right way forward. China's cooperation with Iran complies with international law. We are closely following the situation and will do everything necessary to protect China's rights and interests. And so you can be sure China will continue to pay Iran for its oil, and Donald Trump will not be able to do anything about that. The most striking response to Scott Bessent's childish threat came from the Speaker of Iran's parliament, who taught Natalie Harp and Donald Trump a thing or two today about devastatingly effective social media posting, exhibiting a fluency in American culture that no one in the Trump White House has with Iranian culture. The Speaker of Iran's parliament actually tweeted this. Him, economic D-Day, also him, 5 seconds later, LOL. Why would I want to blow up the global financial system? Sir, this ain't Normandy. This is improv night, and you forgot your own script. Leading off our discussion tonight is Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama and MS Now political and national security analyst. He is the author of All We Say, The Battle for American Identity, A History in 15 Speeches. Ben, please help me with this. Who are these people? Who in Iran could possibly have written that tweet? Improv night, LOL. This is presumably someone who's never been to the United States. I mean, most people in the Iranian regime in their lifetimes have never been to the United States. How do they get this kind of fluency in our culture?
No, because they actually spend time trying to understand their adversary, which is something that Trump clearly didn't. I mean, if you connect the different pieces of what you just went through, Lawrence, it's clear that Donald Trump never spent any time speculating about what Iran might do in response to his war. I've been in war games, in part because Bibi Netanyahu made the same presentation to us as he made to Donald Trump about a war in Iran. And as Tulsi Gabbard and her intelligence community suggested to Trump, what we found in those war games is they would close the Strait of Hormuz. They would have a more radical regime after a U.S. attack than before it. The Iranians study us. Trump did not spend the time studying them. And that is why, in part, we are in the predicament we're in which he cannot get himself out of the crisis that he's created. I mean, the only thing that we're trying to accomplish that I can tell in the war right now is to reopen the Strait of Hormuz that was open before the war began. If ever there was a sign of failure in war, it's that. There's no other objective that is even in reach for Donald Trump. And he's getting mocked by officials in the Iranian government because of it.
So the Treasury Secretary, in an attempt to defeat one country, Iran, says that his threat is to blow up the worldwide financial system. That includes the United States, that includes Europe, that includes South America, that includes Asia. It's the world he's talking about blowing up. And one of the things that's so ridiculous about that is, as he describes it, he's issuing the threat, and as he describes it, you can just tell they're never going to do that. Isn't he describing a threat that he cannot possibly follow through on?
Yes. And a couple of things about this, Lawrence. I mean, first of all, the sanctions they did announce on Iran are like the sanctions that would be issued on Iran on a normal Tuesday for the last 10 years. They designated a few ships and individuals. I mean, this was not in any way some new front in the economic warfare against Iran. I want to say something else, though. This is defensive because think about what D-Day represents. Tens of thousands of Americans getting on small boats and going across English Channel and storming beaches into Nazi gunfire to wrest back control of the European continent from fascism. Scott Bessent is associating himself with those men because he announced some paltry sanctions on Iran and made threats that he can't keep. I mean, so first of all, we should reclaim D-Day from people like Scott Bessent, who clearly don't understand the scale of the sacrifice that went into it. But second of all, yes, if he were to actually go through with these threats and sanction Chinese banks for their purchases of Iranian oil, the entire global economy would collapse. Because you can't cut off China and India and several other countries, Turkey, from the entire global economy without setting off a chain reaction that would devastate the American and global economy. Scott Bessent knows that. So he knows that all he's engaged in is a pretty weak public relations exercise to make the Trump administration look tough at a time in which they're being humiliated. And that's all that's happening.
And that's what makes the Iranian response on social media so effective, completely cutting the thing down in a couple of comic lines written in Iran. Didn't Bessent just walk right into that Iranian tweet?
He did, and the rest of the world sees it that way. And this is like the Iranian regime is repugnant. They do horrible things. They also know that Scott Bessent has no cards to play. And they know that, frankly, the rest of the world doesn't really support what the United States is doing. And so what's very strange about watching this, Lawrence, is that all that talk about economic D-Day and all these things, that's designed for kind of Trump's right-wing media and his base. Nobody else in the world buys it anymore. I mean, part of what we're living through with the Iran war, and a lot of things are happening in the Trump administration right now, is that nobody beyond his most diehard supporters, the 30% of the people that will stick with him, actually pay any attention to this anymore. The Iranians are shrugging it off. The rest of the world doesn't believe it. Most Americans think this is a disaster. They're only talking to themselves, and that's dangerous when you're talking about things like a war that is actually causing great disruptions to the global economy and risks to American service members. And they don't seem to care about that. They only seem to care about the next talking point that will get them through the next week.
And they're losing Trump voters. We're going to hear from a Trump voter in the next segment who is off the Trump wagon, as he puts it, because of this kind of thing. Ben Rhodes, thank you very much for starting us off tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Coming up, Donald Trump has found a new way to hurt people in Iowa. And that is next with Iowa Democratic Senate candidate Josh Turek. MS Now's Alex Tabbitt went to the Iowa State Fair last weekend.
President Trump promised to bring down prices. You voted for him 3 times. Are you disappointed?
Very disappointed. Very disappointed.
Why?
Because the prices haven't gone down. I don't know. I'm over it, I think. Over the Trump thing. The Trump wagon, whatever you want to call it.
You could talk directly to the president. about the war, about the prices, about the economy, what would you tell him?
Stop the bullshit. Make America great, like you said. That's what I'd say.
The Trump wagon is in trouble in Iowa tonight after Donald Trump decided to complicate his stupid trade war with the world and his even stupider trade war with Canada by giving a special deal to some other countries to send cheap beef into the United States to try to bring down the price of beef in our supermarkets that have gone up because of Donald Trump. And so Iowa's beef producers now have to compete with Donald Trump's friends in Argentina, who Donald Trump apparently wants to help more than he wants to help American beef producers. Today, America's oldest senator, Chuck Grassley of Iowa, a Trump supporter, said he's not on the Trump wagon for this one.
Iowa cattle farmers stand ready to increase their herds, but it's hard to make large investments when domestic producers might be undercut by foreign beef. Americans should have access to safe and affordable meat, but the best way to lower beef prices is not through imported beef. We need to put America farmers first.
Joining us now is Iowa State Representative Josh Turek. He is the Democratic nominee for the United States Senate in Iowa. Representative Turek, if you win, you'll be serving in the Senate with Chuck Grassley. So tonight's first question is, what else do you agree with Chuck Grassley on?
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Great to be here. Something I don't say that often is that I agree with Senator Grassley, and I'll say that on this particular issue, I 100% agree. This does not help any Iowa farmer. This does not help our beef producers. What we're hearing every single place that we're going all across rural Iowa is that this is just one gut punch after another. First, it's $20 billion to Argentina. And our Iowa soybean farmers being upside down. Then you've got the tariffs, which is decimated commodities prices. We lead the nation in farm foreclosures because of that. Then you've got the war in Iran that's leading to increase in fuel prices, diesel prices, and fertilizer prices. And now this, and they're upset, and they're ready for change.
Anyone who's planning a building project at home or elsewhere in Iowa, you need lumber. That lumber comes from Canada. That's now 50% more expensive in Iowa and everywhere else in the country if that lumber's coming from Canada, thanks to Donald Trump. Do Iowa voters connect their price increases to the Trump tariffs?
Yeah, I certainly think they are now. I mean, we're a state that has, I think, been disproportionately hurt, arguably the most of any state by the tariffs and by the war in Iran. I mean, we're basically dead last for every single economic metric. We're one of 3 states already seeing our economy contract. We're essentially dead last for every healthcare metric. We've closed 842 healthcare clinics in the last 6 years. The Medicaid cuts disproportionately hurt us because we're an older and a poorer state. We've got a water quality crisis, a cancer crisis. We've seen public education scores precipitously drop. And now, largely because of the tariffs, we lead the nation in farm foreclosures, heading towards a second farm crisis, which is only being made dramatically worse due to this war in Iran and these chaotic tariffs that we're seeing over and over.
So Donald Trump now has a majority disapproval rating in Iowa. How do you think that affects your campaign dynamics?
Well, I feel like we've got a lot of momentum. Fox News agrees with me. They've shifted this to toss-up, as has Cook Political Report. Iowans are upset, and they should be. They've had someone like Ashley Hinson in D.C. that has voted to cut health care for 110,000 Iowans, to see 119,000 Iowans see their health care premiums double or triple. She's made cuts to Social Security, and in the meantime become 10 times more wealthy just in 6 years up in D.C., $50,000 of taxpayer dollars to give her a luxury D.C. apartment. Iowans are upset, and they're ready for change.
As you go forward in the campaign, what do you think the closing issue is going to be for you when you get into October?
Oh, without a doubt, this is cost, corruption, kitchen table issues. It's focusing on the issues that apply to all 3.2 million Iowans. I don't care where I go across the state, urban areas, rural areas. It's people are struggling just to keep food on the table, a roof above their head, pay their electric bill. And now with this war in Iran, that Ashley Hinson has voted in favor of continuing 6 times, keep gas in their tank. This is what it's about, is that we've had a delegation that has just looked out for the haves, for the billionaires and the large corporations, and it's time to have a common sense prairie populist that is going to be out there fighting for Iowans, fighting for the middle class, fighting for our workers, because it's being hollowed out. People are struggling everywhere, and they're ready for change.
Josh Turek, Democratic candidate for Senate in Iowa, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, my friend.
And coming up, there's breaking legal news tonight in the fight against Donald Trump's attempts to stop your right to vote by mail. Andrew Weissman joins us next. Today, a federal judge rejected Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator and convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell's appeal to reopen her case. The judge said the evidence in her trial, quote, conclusively established her guilt, end quote. And the breaking legal news of the night is that Democrats are filing a new lawsuit against Donald Trump's attempt to control voting by mail. Mark Elias announced on social media today, I am proud to be representing the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the Democratic National Committee, the Democratic Governors Association, and leaders Schumer and Jeffries in the critical fight for voting rights. And in another case, remember these names: Brett Schumann, Eric Hamilton, Brantley Myers. They are the Trump Justice Department lawyers who put in writing in a court filing yesterday a threat from them to demolish the Kennedy Center in an attempt to obtain legal permission to put Donald Trump's name on the Kennedy Center. Those 3 eager vandals posing as lawyers told the court in writing, quote, the center will deteriorate further into an unsafe, decrepit structure that will be required to be taken down with a determination to follow on what to build on the site, such as a large outdoor amphitheater overlooking the Potomac River. They said that's what will happen to the Kennedy Center if Donald Trump cannot put his name on it. Joining us now is Andrew Weissman, former FBI general counsel and an MS Now legal analyst. He is the author of Liar's Kingdom, How to Stop Trump's Deceit and Save America. Andrew, let's begin with the voting by mail case. A lot of fast action in the last 24 hours. The Supreme Court procedurally saying it was too soon to try to stop Donald Trump from doing what he's doing because the Postal Service had not issued their rule yet about mail-in ballots. Now the Postal Service has issued the rule. Now we have new lawsuits.
Yes, that is a perfect way to describe it, because there's been a lot of language about the Supreme Court decision that sort of is overheated, because it is just a procedural decision in fact, although there is really disturbing language. My reaction to the announcement from Mark Elias is that the Democrats, it's basically, where have you been? Because there are already 2 lawsuits that have been seeking to enjoin what the president has done in his executive order in March. And one of those still has an injunction that's still in effect. And so the Supreme Court decision is one that, as a practical matter, so far does not serve to green light what is going on, because there is an injunction right now as to its going forward as to the midterm elections that are coming up. So it's great that there are more people bringing yet another lawsuit, but I don't see it adding anything to the 2 existing lawsuits. In fact, there are more than 2 that are going on with respect to the executive order.
So what should we expect to happen in this case between now and Election Day?
So it is going to head back to the Supreme Court. And let me give you the language in the decision from yesterday that I find most disturbing and is a way to sort of think about what is, I think, likely to come. And this is the part that's not good news. The way that the court described Donald Trump's executive order about mail-in voting is as follows. About 5 months ago, President Trump issued an executive order, and this is the key language, designed to maintain public confidence in federal elections. Well, that's certainly not how I think of the executive order. I don't think it's as you think about it. It certainly isn't how the people challenging it think about it. The court goes on to say that the executive order neither requires nor forbids anything of anyone outside the executive branch. That would seem to suggest that the court is looking at this as long as Donald Trump is just ordering things within the executive branch, he can do whatever he wants. Well, here's my hypothetical. What if he said, you cannot mail out or accept ballots from people who are Democrats? And in fact, by the way, what he is doing is a proxy of that. So that hypothetical really gets at the nub of it. That would be the president doing something solely within the executive branch, but would be plainly unlawful. And so I do think that this is going to be a battle royal within these lawsuits and within the Supreme Court as to whether this is going to be upheld or not. Huge challenge for voters, obviously, and a huge challenge, particularly in red states with governors who will go along with what the president is trying to do.
Andrew Weissmann, thank you very much for joining our coverage tonight.
You're welcome.
And coming up, Donald Trump raised the single stupidest thing ever in negotiations with Canada in what the Wall Street Journal is now calling the dumbest trade war in history. That's next. Because Donald Trump cannot speak a single sentence in a foreign language, imagine how he seethes with jealousy when he has to listen to foreign leaders effortlessly switch from their native language to English and other languages. And now we know Donald Trump apparently flies into rage when Canada's prime minister does it in his own country.
Il semblait que nous soyons près d'avoir un accord global et équitable avec les Américains. Mais ils ont changé, y compris les menaces contre la langue française et la culture québécoise. À cause de ça, c'est la fin de cette étape.
That was Mark Carney explaining in a bilingual press conference that trade negotiations with the United States broke down for many reasons, including the fact that Donald Trump was trying to restrict the use of the French language in Canada. Donald Trump, or Natalie Harp, posted on social media today, "I would never interfere with Canadians speaking French!" Exclamation point. And in the same post, he told this lie, "I love French Canadians!" Exclamation point. So whose idea was it to interfere with the French language in Canada? And who are you going to believe on this one, by the way? Donald Trump saying I would never interfere with Canadians speaking French, or Mark Carney, who you just heard tell you that Donald Trump was indeed trying to interfere with the French language in Canada? Was that Howard Lutnick's idea? Was that Natalie Harp's idea? It is by far the single stupidest thing ever raised in negotiations with Canada by anyone. Today, Canada announced how they plan to fight back in Donald Trump's trade war against them, which the Wall Street Journal is calling, quote, the dumbest trade war in history.
Today, I'm announcing that Canada will match the United States tariffs dollar for dollar, rate for rate. Effective September 8, Canada will impose counter tariffs of up to 15, 25, or 50% on $27.6 billion in imports from the United States of America. For each product, our tariff would match the American tariff on the same type of Canadian good.
Joining us now is Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania. He's the top Democrat on the House Budget Committee and is a member of the House Ways and Means Committee, which actually has jurisdiction, constitutional jurisdiction, over tariffs. Congressman Boyle, there are so many things to go after here, but let's begin with this attempt by Donald Trump to actually interfere with the use of the French language in Canada. This is a level of madness that we could never have guessed at.
Well, if the president is watching your program tonight, I have good news for him. I will only be speaking English, as I do not speak French. So he won't be triggered by anything. Well, he'll probably be triggered by the rest of what I say, only he'll be understanding it in our American dialect of English. The Wall Street Journal opinion page, I can't believe I'm saying this, is right yet again. This is the dumbest trade war that we have ever fought. And, you know, this is so absurd. It sounds like an absurd 1980s goofy comedy, maybe starring John Candy, and we can all have a good laugh at it. Except when you stop laughing, the only alternative is maybe to cry or to bang your head against the wall, because the real damage that is being done here is tremendous. We have an economy right now that is really teetering on recession. It's been called a jobless economy for the last year plus. We have an inflation that continues to climb. So we're right on that knife's edge as to whether or not we're going to fall into a recession. Having a trade war with one of our two largest trading partners is exactly the kind of thing that can push us over the edge into a recession.
So Donald Trump has proved today that he knows that Americans pay American tariffs, because his strategy for lowering beef prices is to lower American tariffs on beef imported from other countries. That's how he's trying to get the price of beef down, by cutting the federal sales tax imposed as a tariff on imported beef that we all pay.
Yeah, I mean, very simply, a tariff is a tax the same way a mortgage is a kind of loan, period. We now have de facto a form of a national sales tax in the United States of America. Anytime you buy a good from more than 90 some odd countries, you are now paying more for that good in a tax that is collected by the U.S. government, paid for by American consumers. And we're still waiting, oh, by the way, for more than $100 billion to be released, as was ordered by the U.S. Supreme Court, to American companies and American consumers who paid that tax. That's the great irony. In the end of the day, the man who was elected for more than any other reason, because he promised the American people he would lower costs, and I quote, on day one, hasn't lowered them. And in fact, he has placed a huge tax increase, our largest tariffs since the 1930s.
Congressman Brendan Boyle, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Tonight's last word from Dolly Parton is next.